Welcome back to Retrieving Sanity, a podcast where we dive into the depths of mental health one laugh at a time. I'm your host, Keegan, and I'm here to talk about everything from anxiety and depression to self-care and finding joy in the everyday. Because, let's face it, life can suck, but we don't have to navigate it alone. Retrieving Sanity is a partner with Podcast for Prevention, an initiative from Start Day 1 that aims to prevent suicide and promote mental health awareness. Together, we're working to break the stigma and create a more supportive community. So, grab a cup of coffee, sit back, relax, and let's retrieve our sanity together. And today we have author Jim Marshall of Septimics, and his areas of expertise include psychology, philosophy, theology, parapsychology, science, engineering, mathematics, law, literature, history, music, organization, metaphysics, military science, political science, physical culture, and education. Wow, that's quite a list. Jim, tell me, how did you get all those areas of expertise? Didn't it take quite a bit of, life?
Yeah, that's actually two different questions. But yeah, I went to school for 28 years,
Okay.
which is a lot more than most people. But more importantly, I have no memory of a time when I was not intensely interested in learning everything taught in every university.
Oh, wow.
Now, of course, that's not possible, but the impetus was always there, and it still is. So I just have an insatiable curiosity, and I always want to know. I'm not somebody who operates on belief or opinion, and I want to know what is the actual data. And so I was a very good student. So I was an honor and scholarship student throughout, and eventually, I came to master many subjects, and so I'm now a polymathic intellectual. And as such, I wrote a book called Septemics, Hierarchies of Human Phenomena.
Okay. So what is Septimics?
Septemics is a philosophical science based on the fact that many phenomena related to humans occur in a sequence of 7 levels. Literally, the word septemics means of or pertaining to 7.
Okay.
Septemics comprises a collection of scales or sequences, each of which breaks down various human phenomena into a hierarchy of 7 steps.
Okay.
There are 35 such scales,
Oh, wow.
each of which is unique. And between them, they span the spectrum of human experience, by which I mean any problem, dilemma, situation, difficulty in the life of any person that has anything to do with people can successfully be analyzed by one or more of these scales. Usually more than one.
Usually more than one.
Yeah.
Even though each one is unique in its own way, correct?
Yes. For example, if you're in a romantic relationship, that's complicated. That has many aspects to it.
Yeah.
So you could look at the scale of relationships, the scale of sexuality, the scale of communication, the scale of allegiance, the scale of basic purposes, the scale of motivation. These are all going to be relevant to something like that. But most situations with people, you'll find several scales, at least several scales, that will help you. So the benefit of this is, if you can't figure it out by scale A, you can figure it out by scale B.
Okay.
Sometimes it's not clear where a person is on a certain scale, but it's clear where he is on another scale. So if you analyze it by the scale and where it's obvious, now you have some insight into it. And at some point you can go back to the previous scale, and then you might be able to resolve it on that scale as well.
Okay.
So let me give you an example of how this might work. So let's say you have a couple that have been dating for 2 years, and they're talking about getting married.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be a reasonable question to ask, why does this person want to marry me?
Yeah, that would be reasonable. Yeah.
It's a big step, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not saying to ask the partner. I'm saying, look in the book. There is a scale of motivation. There are only 7 basic human motivations, and all of the others are subsets of those.
Oh, that makes sense.
So this whole subject is very user-friendly because you're always selecting from a menu of 7, which is not hard to do.
Yeah.
So the guy looks at the scale of motivation. He knows this woman very well after 2 years, right? He looks at the scale and says, oh, I can see. She wants to marry me because she loves me. That's level 1, the highest motivation of all. Okay? But that might not happen.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
he'll say, you know, now that I think about this, I think she wants to marry me because I drive a Maserati, I have a $15 million condo, I have a 60-foot yacht, I fly my own Learjet, and I have $10 million in the bank. That's a different motivation. I'm not saying it's good or it's bad. I'm just saying it's different.
This is true.
Now,
Yes.
what he does with that is up to him. That's not for us to say. He might say, okay, she wants to marry me for my money. That's not the first time that's happened. But this woman is smart. She's pretty. She's funny. We have a lot of fun together. We seem to be very compatible. So I'm going to marry her anyway.
Yeah.
That could happen.
Yeah.
Or he might say, in the alternative, I don't want to marry somebody who wants me for my money. I want to marry somebody who loves me for myself. And he breaks up with her.
Yeah.
Now, in that latter instance, you might think he would be upset about this, and you would be wrong. He will not be upset. He will be relieved.
Yeah.
He'll say to you or to himself, thank God I figured this out now before I wound up owing her $15,000 a month in alimony.
Yeah, that would suck.
You see? So this is very personal. What the person does with it is up to him. But this enables you to really figure out what's going on with people.
Okay.
So let me give you an analogy to tell you how easy this is.
Okay.
So, you know, I'm very much into gardening because I've been gardening since I was a boy. So you might say, Jim, I have a garden. Come over and look at it. I say, okay. So I show up at Keegan's house and I say, he's got hydrangeas, chrysanthemums, irises, peonies, roses, tulips, forget-me-nots, etc., chrysanthemums. See? Now, the reason I can analyze it that way is I know a lot about flowers. And if you wanted, I could advise you. I could say, well, these need a lot of sun, but these do better in the shade, etc., etc. See?
Yeah.
Now, if you bring some 5-year-old kid into your garden, he's going to see and smell exactly what I see and smell, right?
Yeah.
But all he can say is, these are pretty and they smell nice.
Yeah. This is
That's
true.
all he knows.
Yeah.
Now, most adults are like that little kid as regards people.
Okay.
They
I can
don't
see
know what
that.
they're looking at. They have no way to analyze it. And that's why more than 50% of the people who get married in the United States wind up getting a divorce.
That would make sense.
Yeah.
That would make sense.
But it's not just limited to that, it's everything. So let me continue my analogy to show you how useful this is.
Okay.
Let's say you own a car dealership and you need a new salesman. So you are interviewing people, right? Guy comes in, and while you're interviewing him, it comes out that this is a money-motivated person. You know, when you look in his eyes, you see dollar signs.
Uh-oh.
Okay, that is what you want.
Oh,
because
really?
he gets a commission for every car he sells.
Yeah, this is
So
true.
he's going to be motivated to sell your cars, and that's why you're hiring him.
Yeah.
See?
Yeah.
This could
yeah.
be the same guy who says, I don't want to marry a woman who loves me for my money. But as far as hiring some guy to work as a salesman for him, that's fine.
Yeah.
You see?
Yeah.
So this is extremely useful across the spectrum, anything that has to do with people.
Okay.
And let me explain why that's so. This is natural law.
Natural law.
These scales are natural law in the same way that the Fibonacci sequence is natural law, in the same way that Newton's 3 laws of motion are natural law, in the same way that the Pythagorean theorem is natural law. I simply discovered these. They existed, I'm sure, for at least 6,000 years. They're there. They exist. Every person is at some level on every scale.
Okay.
It's like a blood pressure.
Yeah.
You have a blood pressure. I don't know what it is. But when you show up at the doctor, one of the first things they do is take your blood pressure.
Yep.
Because they know you have it, but they don't know what it is. Right? Takes them 3 minutes. Okay, write it down. So everybody is somewhere on one of these scales.
Okay. So which scales are they?
Well, let me tell you the names of the 35 scales, and then you
Okay.
know exactly what subject matter is covered in this book.
Okay.
Now, 24 of these scales are what I call individual scales, meaning they apply to an individual. And 11 of them are group scales, meaning they apply primarily to a group.
Okay.
So these are the individual scales. The scale of basic purposes. the scale of personal influence, the scale of choice, the scale of permeation, the scale of thought, the scale of identity, the scale of evaluation, the scale of motivation, the scale of control, the scale of stopping, the scale of scholarship, the scale of literacy, the scale of human ability, the scale of memory, the scale of spiritual identity, the scale of mental deletion, the scale of aberration, the scale of physical fitness, the scale of justification, the scale of belief, the scale of equanimity, the scale of attack, the scale of conflict, and the scale of reaction. And
Wow.
these are the group scales, the
Okay.
scale of relationships, the scale of life spheres, the scale of government, the scale of civilization, the scale of survival, the scale of management, the scale of exchange, the scale of communication, the scale of allegiance, the scale of sexuality, and the scale of politics. Any one of these scales by itself could dramatically improve the life of the reader. And let me give you a quick example how that could work.
Okay.
I mentioned the scale of motivation. One of the most important things to know about a person is his motivation. Right? Why is he doing this? That's really important. That's how the police solve crimes. They look for somebody with a motive.
Yeah. What is
Right?
their motivation?
That's how they go about it. So they say, well, this guy has nothing to gain by this guy being murdered, so we're not going to look at him. But they find out, wait a minute, there's a life insurance policy of $500,000, and the beneficiary is the wife. So she becomes a suspect. She may not have done it. I'm just telling you, that's how they proceed.
Yeah.
They would look at her. What is your alibi, et cetera? And so they might clear her and say, well, we need to look at, but they're still looking for a motive.
Yeah.
So you could, if you want, take the scale of motivation and you could ask yourself, what is my wife's motivation toward me? What is my son's motivation toward me? What is my father's motivation toward me? What is my boss's motivation toward me? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You could do this for everyone you know and everyone you have ever known. So you could use this one scale in that particular way, 200, 300, 400 different ways. Now, every time you spot it correctly, you will have a realization. You'll say, oh, that explains why my mother does X, Y, and Z. She has this motive.
Ah, okay.
Now,
That makes sense.
you could then reverse the vector, same scale, and ask, what is my motivation toward my next door neighbor? What is my motivation toward my girlfriend? What is my motivation toward my business partner? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you could use it that way on a reverse vector another 200, 300, 400 times.
Oh, wow.
Now, by the time you finish this, you could, if you want, know the motivation of everybody you know, and your motivation toward them. Now, this would greatly clarify your mind. You would not be going around wondering, gee, I wonder why he does that. Why did he say that? See, you would have a lot of clarity. That's just one scale used in one way. There are 35 scales. So this is very helpful to people. Let me tell you in a general way how this is helpful
Okay.
without going into specifics. I wrote this book to help people. I've had a lifetime of helping people. Each of these 35 scales provides the user with an infallible way of determining the salutariness or the beneficialness of any group, individual, or activity. If that group, individual, or activity moves persons up the scale, it's beneficial or positive. If it moves them down, it's detrimental or negative.
Okay.
So I'm giving you a yardstick by which to assess human affairs, which is an entirely new thing.
Yeah.
More importantly, just finding out where you or another person is at on any scale is by itself inherently beneficial. Because every time you correctly spot anyone on any scale, you have a realization. That's one of the ways you know you found the right level.
Ah, so it's whenever you have that realization.
Yeah. So, you know, let's say you say the scale of control. You say, boy, this guy seems like a control freak to me. Well, I'm going to look at where he is on the scale of control, right? So you say, this guy's at level 5 on the scale of control. That's near the bottom. That explains why he's a control freak. Now you understand that guy much better because that is a very specific level. See, control in people manifests in 7 different ways. And now you know exactly how it manifests with this guy. So again, it gives you clarity. It's specific. Now, once you know the actual level of any person, whether it's yourself or another, on any scale, you can then improve that person if you wish by moving them up one level.
One at a time.
Because I have solved the gradient problem that has bedeviled mankind for 6,000 years.
The gradient problem.
And let me tell you what that is.
Okay.
Most people have problems, situations, dilemmas, difficulties they can't resolve. More than 99% of the time, it's because they don't know the gradient.
And the gradient is?
That's what these levels are. They are the gradients.
Ah, okay.
So, in other words, if a guy is, let's say, the scale of thought, he's at a certain level on the scale of thought, okay? You spot it. You say, okay, now I know how this guy thinks. He thinks in this specific way. That tells you a lot. How are you going to proceed? For example, if someone is going to be a scientist or an engineer, he needs to be able to think analytically.
Yeah.
Okay?
for
That's
sure.
number 3 on the scale of thought. If he's below that, lots of luck. He's not going to be able to make it as a scientist or an engineer or as a mathematician because he does not think analytically. He thinks at level 4, 5, 6, or 7. See? This explains a lot about why you can't get some people to understand certain things.
And can people move up and down the scale on their own?
Yes, as I said, once you know the actual level, you can then improve yourself. Because remember, I mentioned gradients.
Yeah, yeah.
So when you find what level you are, let's say you spot you're at level 5. If you make a serious effort to get to 4, you will get there because it's the next thing up. It's just like if you're on the 3rd floor, if you want to go to the 4th floor, you can. Because it's the next floor up.
Yeah.
If you want to go to the 5th floor, you're going to have to go through the 4th floor one way or another.
Yeah.
When you take the stairs, the escalator, the elevator, there's no getting around it. You're going to have to go through the 4th floor to get there.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm giving you the gradients for life.
Okay.
So, for example, the scale of physical fitness. Okay? When you find your level, it explains exactly what's going on with you physically. I mean, there's a level called tired.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? This
That would
guy
make
is
sense.
tired. Now, that's not as bad as being sick. That's below it.
Yeah.
And it's not as good as being normal, which is above it.
Okay.
So if a guy is sick, right, and I've worked with being a human, a holistic practitioner as part of my work. So I've worked with people. So if the guy is sick, right, and then he comes, I say, how you doing? He says, well, I'm doing better, but I'm just exhausted. I'm happy. You know why? He moved up a level.
Oh, really?
He's not sick now. He's tired. That's better. That's the next highest level. Now we start working on that. Getting a lot of sleep, et cetera, et cetera. Taking the right supplements. See, now eventually he'll say, are you still tired? No, I'm not tired anymore. Now he's normal. That's level 4. See?
Oh. So what's level 1?
Well, I don't want to go into the whole scale because we can do that with all 35 scales.
Yeah, true.
Because I was just basically telling you how this is generally beneficial. So you not only can you move up, you should move up, and if you try, you will move up. So if you're at level 5 and you try to get to level 1, 2, or 3, you will fail because it's too steep a gradient.
Yeah.
And that's why crash diets and crash exercise programs don't work.
That would make sense. That would make sense.
Look, I've worked as a trainer with people, right? So let's say a guy comes to me and says, Jim, I'm 100 pounds overweight. I've been trying to fix this. Would you help me? Would you train me? Yes. Okay. Well, I'm not going to just give this guy a 100-pound barbell and say, lift this. Or tell him to go out and run 5 miles. That would be malpractice.
Yeah.
I would say to him, okay, tell me about it. And right, I'd get a lot of data from this guy. And I'd sort of size him up, right? And I'd say, okay, seems to me this guy could curl 15 pounds. So I'll give him the 15-pound dumbbell. And I'll say, all right, I'll show him how to do a curl. I want you to do this with it, right? Let's see how many you can do, right? Now, as he's doing them, I'm going to ask him. Let's say he gets to 10. I'll say, how's this going? He says, this is pretty easy. Okay, keep going. So let's say he gets to 15. He says, yeah, it's a little hard, but I can do this. I said, okay. I want you to do 15 reps every day, 3 sets on each arm. And at the end of the week, we'll talk again. So at the end of the week, I'd say to him, how are you doing? If he says to me, I got this. Okay, let's go to 20 pounds.
Okay.
See? Then we have to find how many he can do. This is tough. I can only do about 12 of these. Okay, I want you to do 12, 3 sets, each arm, every day for a week. See?
Yeah.
Finding the gradient. That's what I did for my clients for 40 years. So let me tell you how I discovered this.
Okay.
Because it tells you what it is and where it came from and why I know it's correct.
Okay.
The story really starts when I was accepted into engineering school at the age of 16. Now, of course, I thought at the time that I was going to be engineering physical things like all the other engineers. Well, there's airfoils, motors, gears, things like that. But by the time I had my bachelor's degree, it was clear to me that I wanted to engineer the human psyche. Because that is the area of greatest unknown, of greatest mystery, and more importantly, it is the area in which we as a race are failing miserably. 95% of the problems in industrialized society are because people don't understand people.
I would have to agree, yeah.
Yeah. So, because look, this wasn't true 200 years ago. 200 years ago, when this country was founded, the average life expectancy was 35 years. Now it's, what is it, 86 or something like that? See,
Something like that, yeah.
We're not dying from yellow fever and cholera and things like that, or from starvation or exposure, right? There's all these things in society that have ameliorated all that stuff. You know, even for poor people, we have Medicaid. So you can get shots that prevent you from getting measles and things like that. So now the problem is understanding people. Okay?
Yeah.
So think about, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, and people are quite the enigma.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes. And this book solves that problem. So for example, let's say you have a significant other, a girlfriend or a wife or whatever, right? You could, knowing her as well as you do, get this book, and you could find her level on every scale. And by the time you finish that, she would not be an enigma to you. You would understand her better than she understands herself. And every time she does something, you say, well, of course she's doing that. She's at level 4 on the scale of attack. And you see, once you know where someone is, you can predict what he's going to do.
Okay. Yeah, because you already have an idea of where they're at. So they can either go up or down.
That's
one
right.
way. Okay.
Right. So you could then, let's say you find some problem area with your wife, right? You're having some difficulty with her, or she's having a difficulty, right? You could show her the book and say, take a look at this. Where are you on this scale? See? And if she's having difficulty with this, she's going to look at it and say something like, you mean there's a scale of control? And you're going to say, yeah. Where are you on this scale? You don't have to tell me if you don't want, but for your own illumination, where are you on this? I guarantee you she's going to want to know that.
Yeah.
Because she's having some trouble in that area, right? She says, I can't control the kids. Scale of control, see?
Yeah.
So, what's going to happen is, she'll look at it. And remember, she's motivated to figure this out.
Yeah.
In a matter of seconds, she will find a bracket. She'll say something like, I can see that it's definitely not 1, 2, or 3, because that's the top of the scale. I'm not having a lot of trouble with this. So I would have to be at 4, 5, 6, or 7. See?
Yeah.
At first blush, you'll always find a bracket, because some of the things are like preposterously inapplicable to a person.
Yeah. Yeah, especially.
So then you say to her, look, go ahead and read the chapter, and then you can get this exactly, because I tell you with specificity what that level is like, how people behave at that level. I give you examples and analogies. This is not hard to figure out. So she reads it, she knows who she is, and she says, well, I can see now I'm at level 5 on the scale of control. That's not so good. No wonder I can't control the kids. That explains why, and she's having a realization.
Yeah.
So then you tell her, well, you know, we can move you up to level 4, and then you'll have less difficulty controlling them. You can? Yes, it tells you in the book how to do that. You see?
Uh-huh.
So then she just focuses on level 4, ignores all the rest of it. It's not relevant to her.
Yeah.
And if she makes a serious effort, she will get there. And I'll tell you why.
Okay.
There is a datum in engineering that says, very old datum, at least 100 years old, probably older than that, I don't really know. But the datum says 90% of finding the right answer is asking the right question. This happens all the time in practical matters, right? You bring your car into a mechanic, right? He says, what's wrong with it? You say, I don't know, it won't start. So he starts asking questions. Let me check the battery. Oh, battery's good. Let me check the alternator. Oh, alternator's good. Let me check the starter. Ah, it's the starter. You need a new starter. He puts in the starter, it works.
Yeah.
See? It's asking the right question. That's what professionals do all the time.
Yes, sir.
So I had a long career as a human development engineer, working one-on-one with hundreds of clients for cumulatively many thousands of hours, using engineering principles, engineering tactics, engineering devices, engineering strategies, and so forth, to help them to attain higher states of responsibility, intelligence, ethics, whatever the person wanted to get at, right?
Okay.
So while this was happening, all of my clients improved, but I started to notice incidentally that I could predict the outcome of the session.
Really?
I never told this to anyone, but I made notes, which is what an engineer would do, right? You observe some phenomenon. Ah, this runs better on this fuel than on this fuel. I'm going to make a note of that. See?
Yes.
That's
Start
what we
making
do.
pattern recognition.
So what happened was, as the decades rolled by, I just got better and better and better at this because I would see where the session was going. And so it's like I knew the end of the movie. So I could sort of guide the guy into it by asking him the right questions. You see, we're back to asking the right question.
Yeah.
So he would say, yeah, now I see why I can't get along with my wife. She's just like my mother. See? And his relationship with her just got better.
Yep.
So what I realized was that the client would be at a specific level, on a specific scale that I had previously observed. And as a result of our interaction, he would go up to the next level. Now, this happened thousands and thousands of times. Sometimes it would happen 4, 5, 6 times in one session.
Oh, wow.
Now, every time this occurred, it verified my hypothesis because the clients knew absolutely nothing about this. They didn't know what notes I was taking. They didn't know what theories I was using. They didn't know what tactics I had. I used biofeedback. They didn't know anything about biofeedback. They didn't see what I was getting from the biofeedback. All the guy knows is, Jim, I can't get along with my mother. Can you help me with this? Sure. Sit down. See? And then we worked for a while, and he says, yeah, I can see why I can't get along with my mother. I'm not going to do that anymore. See? And now it's better. He's happy. But meanwhile, I can see that he was at a certain level and went up to the next level on that scale that I had previously observed. So by 1995, 2 things happened. One was, by then, I had simply observed and recorded about 32 scales that varied in lengths between 3 and 7, that I had simply observed. Now, you have to realize when I say observe, I would see it in the session, but then I would go out of the session in the real world, and I would see the same thing.
Yeah.
This guy, right? Some guy I don't even know. I'm not even talking to him. I can see he's at level 3 on the scale of attack. That tells me a lot about him. See, I'm not telling him or anything. I'm just noticing it. See? It's that easy to do once you know the data.
Once you know the data.
Once you know the data, and that's what's in the book. So another thing happened about that same time, which is I was once pondering a difficult client. And I suddenly realized one day that she was at a level on a particular scale that I had not previously observed. In other words, I had this 6-level scale that by then I absolutely knew was correct from decades of experience. And I realized, it has a 7th level. Now, as soon as I saw that 7th level, I inserted it where I could see it had to be inserted. And at that moment, it manifested mathematically.
Oh, wow.
Now, let me tell you what I mean by that. I took 26 semesters of math and loved every minute of it. Okay?
Oh,
I
boy.
think in math. I see math in the world. When it appears, I observe it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can see that.
So that's how most scientists and engineers are. You know, they say that math is the handmaiden of science. So if you are trained in math, engineering, or science, this is real to you. You see it. Now, what a mathematical manifestation is, data jumps out at you. And let me tell you what I mean by that. The whole point of math is you start with an equation or a formula, and you coax data out of it.
Yeah.
That is how Einstein found E equals mc squared. Everybody in the math and physics community knows how he did it. It was done mathematically. He simply worked with these mathematical data. And at some point he came down to E equals mc squared. Ah, E equals mc squared. Whoa. See, that changes everything. So when you see data appear like that, that is a mathematical manifestation. So I'll give you an example. Let's say a friend of mine says, you know, I was thinking of paving a walkway diagonally across my garden. I say, really? How big is your garden? He says, well, it's 30 feet by one side and 40 feet on the other. I would tell him, well, that pathway is going to be 50 feet long. So that's the Pythagorean theorem.
Yeah.
Okay, so
A squared plus B squared equals C squared, right?
right, yeah, or like, you know, if a guy is trying to make a circular table, right? He's got this formica, and he's going to cut it with a saw. You know, how much area does this table cover? Well, I say to him, how much area do you want this to cover? See? So he'll say, well, if it was a square table, I'd like it to be 10 by 10. It's 100 square feet. So I could actually calculate that for him just by using pi r squared, the area of the circle. See? It's no big thing. It's, there it is. It's this. So that's the radius you want this table to have. It has to have a radius of x. That's right. So we measure it. There it is. So that's the whole point of math. You get data from it. You get not only reliable data, exact data.
Exactly.
So when I inserted that 7th level into the 6th level scale, all of this data jumped out at me. And at that moment, it went from being a line, which is what a scale is, to a plane, meaning a body of data. So I had this whole body of data relative to this scale. It wasn't just a scale anymore. And I saw that it had all of these interlocking, interacting mathematical functions that were inescapable. They were mathematical. There's no getting away from the fact that pi is 3.1416. Now, you can get it to further decimal points if you want. But not many people do, because in actual calculation, usually 4 decimal points is plenty.
More than enough.
So that's not an opinion or a belief. Okay?
Yeah.
That is a fact. That is what these scales are. So I looked at this, I said, whoa, whatever the hell this is, this has to be natural law. Because it's got mathematics embedded in it. So then I said, wait a minute. I wonder how many of these other scales that I have are actually 7-level scales that had not been developed all the way, like this one, because I wasn't developing anything. I was just helping my clients and making notes. So knowing what I was looking for, I then inspected and researched all these other scales. And in a short period of time, they all went to 7 levels. And when they did, they each manifested mathematically. So now I had 32 7-level scales, each of which had mathematics embedded in it. And having gone to school for 28 years, I said to myself, I never saw anything like this before. This seems like a new subject to me that could really help people.
Sounds like it.
Because it tells you the next step.
Yeah.
See?
Yeah. It's simple.
It tells you what the next thing is. It tells you where you are, where you're going to go if you succeed, and where you're going to go if you fail, which is the level down. below it,
Yeah.
which is really useful information. Because you're not flailing around wondering what to do. You see, it solves the gradient problem. Just like that guy. Okay,
Yep.
guy comes to me, okay, he can do 15 reps on 12, 15 reps on 15 pounds. I'm going to let him do that. And then at the end of the week, okay, this is pretty easy. Okay, let's go to 20. See? Now, okay, now I can only do about 12. Okay, fine, do 12. See, that's the gradient. So that's what this is. I'm giving you the gradients across 35 axes of human affairs.
Ah. And so it's a cheat book.
Yeah, if you want to look at it that way, yeah. I mean, it's data. Now, let me tell you how to think about this,
Okay.
so it makes sense.
Okay.
Several people have said to me, what book is your book like? And I have to tell them, being a well-read person, I don't think there's ever been a book like this before. And many people have said to me, there's never been a book like this before. But
Interesting.
But I can tell them this. Each of these 35 scales is expressed in what you could call a table or a spreadsheet,
Okay.
which is similar to the periodic table of elements.
Ah.
Now,
That's interesting.
Before Dmitri Mendeleev invented the periodic table, there was chemistry, but he revolutionized it by making it easier to learn, easier to teach, and easier to understand. So a person sees that potassium and sodium are in the same period. Ah, that explains a lot. You mean if I take potassium, the sodium will come out of my system, according to Le Chatelier's principle? Yes! You see, it's practical. So he had about 79 elements, if I recall correctly. Well, since then, we have something like 125 now. And we just keep fitting them in, because it works. So each of these tables is a periodic table for the corresponding subject.
Interesting.
So I read you the 35 subjects. So, for example, let's take the scale of life spheres.
Okay.
Life spheres, what's that? See, and you look, you see, I see, this makes sense. Because it's just like when you look at the periodic table, you probably can remember when you first saw it, maybe you were 12 or 13 or 14 or something in school in science, right? And like most people, even those who don't go into the sciences, you probably said, yeah, this makes sense to me. Hydrogen is number 1, helium is number 2, lithium is number 3, and they all follow numerically, horizontally and vertically. See? It makes perfect sense. So I'm giving you 35 periodic tables. But instead of them being for physical matter, they're for human affairs.
I love it.
And that makes it very easy to understand because it's natural law. It's not counterintuitive.
Yeah, it's going to happen because laws essentially say this is going to happen if this happens.
That's right. So the subtitle of this book is, the book is called Septemics, Hierarchies of Human Phenomena, and the subtitle is Analysis, Prediction, and Management of Human Affairs. This gives you a way to analyze human affairs. Once you analyze it, you can then predict what's going to happen. See?
Interesting.
Let's say you have a guy who's at level 4 on the scale of attack, right? He says, I'm thinking about joining the military. Well, what branch are you thinking of going in? Well, maybe the Marines. I would say to him, don't do it. Because someone who's at level 4 on the scale of attack is not going to do well in the Marines. You have to be at level 2 or above.
Ah, gotcha. So level attack would be how ready you are to be violent?
Right. How willing you are to attack.
Okay.
And there are only 7 levels.
So if someone wanted to be in the Navy, 4 would be okay, maybe.
That might work, yes. Right.
Okay.
Because, or even the Air Force. Especially if he's not going to be a pilot. So this tells you a lot. It tells you where you fit. So I can look at a guy and say, oh, this guy is definitely in the middle of the scale of attack. This guy doesn't want to be in the military. He shouldn't be a policeman. He's not cut out for that. See? Now he could read it himself and say, well, I see him at this level. Well, Yeah, that explains why I never wanted to be a policeman or go in the military. See?
Yeah. Yeah, that would
So-
make sense.
So this is really useful data.
Mm-hmm.
This is not hard to use. It's not hard to understand. It's not hard to use it to help your life.
Mm-hmm.
So let me give you an example.
Okay.
Most people have kids, and most kids have trouble in school.
Mm-hmm.
So dad sees that Junior is having trouble. It's getting low grades. Says, Junior, come here, let me show you this. And he opens the book to the scale of scholarship. Well, Junior's 13. He can read the word scholarship. He knows what that means. So he looks at it and he'll say, you mean there's a scale of scholarship? And the dad says, yes. Where are you on that scale? Guaranteed he's going to want to know that because he's having trouble in this area. Ah. So he looks at it. In a matter of seconds, he will find a bracket. He'll say something like, well, I can see right away that 1, 2, or 3 don't apply to me. That's the top of the scale, and I'm not so good at this. See? And Dad says, okay, so you got it down to it's either 4, 5, 6, or 7. Go ahead and read it, and then you can get it exactly. So Junior reads it. Dad helps him as a tutor. He comes back and says, well, I can see now I'm at level 5. That's not so great. That's near the bottom of the scale. No wonder I'm having trouble in school. And then Dad says, you know, we could make you a better student by moving you from level 5 to level 4. It says, you can? Dad says, yes, it tells you in the book how to do this. Right? So Dad works with the kid. He just follows the instructions in the book. It's like a cookbook. You do X, Y, and Z, right? And so the next report card, instead of getting C's and D's, Junior's getting B's and C's. Now, all this was done without spending any money, without hiring a tutor, without sending him to remedial classes, without invalidating him, without having him be left back. See, this is very congenial. See?
Yeah.
You trust the dad because he's dad. The dad doesn't want to invalidate the kid. He's going to work with him in a congenial way. You see? So this solves a problem.
Yeah, it
Well,
does.
after the kid gets to 4, you could then move him up to level 3.
And so on and so forth.
Right. So you could, if you wish, find your level on every scale and then target yourself for the next level up on every scale. And remember, it's the next level, so it's accessible to you.
I like
It's
that a lot.
not like you're trying to get somewhere you can't get. You know, you can't make an Olympic athlete out of a couch potato.
Not right away, no.
That's right. Now, you can make him into maybe a normal person, and then from there you might make him into sort of an amateur weekend athlete. You know, he plays tennis on the weekend. See?
Yeah.
And then from there you might get him to be somebody who joins a gym. See? So he's still nowhere near being an Olympic athlete, but he might get there someday if he
Yeah.
keeps doing this.
Yeah. And so we have 35 different scales for everything.
Yes.
And how long does it take for someone to go through a scale for themselves?
Okay, that is a wild variable for several
Okay.
different reasons.
Ah.
We don't know the person. How smart is this person? How motivated is this person? How much free time does this person have? How much money does this person have to spend? See, there's all these things that are going to affect it.
Uh-huh.
Also, another aspect of this is these scales vary. Some of these scales are what I call volatile scales, meaning you can change pretty easy on them.
Ah.
Some of them are what I call persistent scales, meaning it's not easy to change. In other words, regardless of the person, it's not an easy scale to move on. So, for example, the scale of basic purposes. Every human being has one of 6 basic purposes. When you find that, it's a major change in your life. You have an epiphany. You say, now I see what my life is about. That explains why I couldn't get along with these guys, but I could get along with these guys. See, and what you do is you throw out the other 6 that are not your level, and you live at that level, knowing what you're doing. That's your purpose. Now, it's not easy to move on that scale. I already know this from, you have to realize I've been working with this material most of my life. Because even before I had the idea of Septemics, I was working with my clients, right? See these things presented in front of me.
Yeah.
Very few people ever change on the scale of basic purposes.
Really?
Yes. Most people, I would say more than 90%, lead an entire life at one level of that scale. Now, if the person is given the scale so he knows what it is, Now he may have a way to figure out where he is, and then he can move up. But without knowing the scale, lots of luck. You see?
Yeah.
So, for example, the most famous example of somebody moving on this scale is St. Paul,
Okay.
right? One of the most famous people in history. The man who brought Christianity to the Gentiles. He was a Jew named Saul, but he was a Roman citizen, and his job was to oppress the Christians. He was going around at the behest of the Romans. Now, this was a powerful, smart, capable person. That was his job. He was like a cop,
Yeah.
right? Like the border patrol. So one day he's on the road to Damascus riding his horse, and this is in the Bible, you can read it. And it says, he saw a light in the sky, and a voice spoke to him and said, Paul, why do you persecute me? And he fell off his horse. And at that moment, he stopped being Saul, and he became St. Paul. He went from level 2 on the scale of basic purposes to level 1. Okay? So that is a famous historical example. But that's a big deal. That's why it's in the Bible and why people have been talking about it for 2,000 years. Most people don't have that. Now, however, let's say you have somebody who's in a Nazi concentration camp but lives. That's probably going to knock him down one level on that scale.
Yeah.
So he goes in and he's at 3 and he comes out, he's at 4. He's a different person. You know, many people are aware. A guy comes out of prison after 30 years, he's a different person. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Person has some big, terrible thing happen to him. He's not the same anymore. Right? So a guy becomes a drug addict, right? And then you see him. He's not the same guy he was when you knew him before. He has gone down a level. So his purpose is different. Well, your basic purpose is what you're trying to do all the time.
Okay.
Whether you succeed or not. It's a big deal to know that.
Yeah.
So, for example, I know the basic purpose of every president of the United States, going back as far as Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and many of the presidents prior to him who I studied, such as Lincoln and Washington and Jefferson. Because this is a persistent trait. If you study the person, 9 out of 10 times he's this way his whole life. So when you look at him and you study him, you say, I can see what this guy is about. He's at this level. So for example, Abe Lincoln was at level 2. He was a leader. Well, the purpose of a leader is conquest.
Yeah.
Abe Lincoln was determined to conquer the Confederacy. He had a very difficult time getting any help. His cabinet wasn't behind him. His generals wouldn't fight. He looked like he wasn't going to be reelected until he found an obscure general named Grant and his friend Sherman. Those guys were willing to fight. And so he put Grant and Sherman in charge, and that's how they won the war. They were willing to conquer. So you can see how big a deal this is. For example, James Buchanan, who was the president before Lincoln, by no stretch of the imagination was that guy at level 2 on that scale. Now, I have not done a study of James Buchanan. He's generally regarded as the worst president ever, the guy who let the Civil War happen. So I could guess, but I know he's not at level 2.
Yeah.
Right?
No.
And from what I do know about him, he's probably not at level 3 either.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's probably going to be at 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Those are very different.
Very different people.
Okay? So, this was a guy who had a terrible presidency. Hundreds of years later, 170 years later, we still say he was the worst president ever. Okay? This is not an upscale person.
No.
He certainly was not high on the scale of attack. For example, Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson was very high on the scale of attack. Okay? Even after he was president, he still preferred to be called general. So he wanted them to call him, even though he was president, General Jackson, because that's who he was. See?
That was him.
He was high on the scale of attack. He was willing to attack. And if you study the man, it's patently obvious. Okay? He attacked and attacked and attacked. Okay? And he was beloved of his troops because of that. And this made him a folk hero, eventually led him to become president of the United States. The first president born in a log cabin.
Yeah.
So you can see that in him. Now, if you don't know about the scale of attack, you don't have that concept.
Yeah.
It's very easy to look at different people and see where they are in these various scales. It's not hard to figure out.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
And whenever someone goes through these scales and they knock themselves on that scale, it's not something that they have to beat themselves up for if they score low on the scale.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
And I'll tell you exactly why.
Okay.
Remember I said, every time you correctly spot a level, we have a realization.
Yeah.
Right? So a guy spots himself on, that explains why I can't get along with girls. I'm at this level. See? He's happy about that because he figured it out.
Yeah.
He's not beating himself up. He's saying, wow, now I know what's going on. I can move myself up to the next level and then I'll do better.
Yeah.
Well, no matter what level you spot, you're always happy.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah. And whether it's you or somebody else. Let's say you spot, okay, well, my mother is at this level on this scale. It's a very low level. You might say, okay, now I understand her better. Now I see what she's doing. You can deal with her better now.
Yeah.
You may not be able to get her to move up a level because she's going to have to cooperate for that. You might say, Mom, look at this book. She says, take a hike. I don't want to read your book. Right? Could happen. So, but now you know what you're dealing with. You see? So, for example, Adolf Hitler was at level 7 on the scale of basic purposes. The objective of someone at level 7 is destruction. That is not obvious to the Nazis and to Eva Braun and to a lot of other people. He was the greatest guy in the world. Okay? That's why they said, seek Heil. Heil Hitler, right? They didn't realize he was at level 7 on this scale. But I'm a serious student of military science. Now, when I was studying World War II, which started in my teens, I would get to certain places and I would see what Hitler did and I would say, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. Because, military science has been around for thousands of years.
Yeah.
It's a very well established, there's certain things we know you should do and certain things we know you should not do. Okay? He violated those principles over and over and over because he didn't know anything about military science. He was a corporal when he was in the war. He never went to military school. So I just would scratch my head. Why would he do that? See, and I really just didn't understand it until I figured out, this is a destructive person. So he wasn't only destructive to the Allies, he was destructive to the Wehrmacht. He was destructive to Germany. He was destructive to his own family. He was destructive to all kinds of people around him. It explains why he did the dopey things he did, because he was destructive. Hermann Goering, who was the second in command of the Nazi Party, told Hitler, if the Russians get in the war, we will lose. Well, Hitler had a non-aggression pact with the Russians, right? But then he attacked them in violation. That's crazy, because what Goering told him, and Goering was a smart man. He was a military professional. See? He knew what he was talking about. It happened exactly the way Goering said. The Russians eventually just rolled over the Germans. They lost 20 million people, and if you understand the Russians, that's not hard to understand. But they wiped out the Germans, meaning the Nazis. So why would he do that? It was destructive.
Destruction.
Because by doing that, he managed to not only destroy the Nazi Party, the German military machine, the German nation, he also destroyed 20 million Russians. So to a destructive person, that makes sense. See,
To him, he still
now
won.
you can say, well, that's crazy. Yes, he was crazy. Somebody at level 7 on that scale is crazy. And generally speaking, people who are at or near the bottom of these scales, depending on how far down they are crazy people.
Yeah, that would sound about right.
Right. So you can analyze a guy against any one of these 35 scales, and you will find a guy at the bottom of a certain scale. See, he might not be at the bottom of the scale of basic purposes, but he's at the bottom of, let's say, the scale of control.
No self-control. No, he'd have no self-control.
Right. Can't control anything. So this is somebody who is not quite playing with a full deck, okay? So when you spot these people, I can absolutely guarantee the reader that this book will prevent catastrophes, dilemmas, bankruptcies, indictments, fistfights, divorces, etc., because you can spot these low-scale people and stay away from them. I do that often. Often I bump into somebody, whether it's online or in 3 dimensions, and I can see, whoa, this guy's at the bottom of this scale. I'm out of here.
Yeah.
See, I'm not going to let this guy wreck my life. Now, let me tell you, when I was a young person, this data didn't exist. I hadn't discovered it yet. Right?
Yeah.
So I made the same stupid mistakes that everybody else makes. I got involved with people I shouldn't have been involved with. Now, for me, that does not happen, cannot happen, will not happen, because I can analyze these people.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an actual example. About 6 months ago, I'm a single guy. About 6 months ago, I met this beautiful blonde, and we were very interested in one another. So we're going through the usual preliminaries, like, what part of town do you live in? What do you like to do for fun? You know, these types of discussions that you have with, you know, what books have you read? You know. So as we're having, and we had 6 or 8 of these discussions. So, because I could see, okay, this could be a serious thing here.
Yeah,
I'm taking my time. So I came to realize we're having a discussion. She's low on this scale. Then another discussion, I realized she's low on this other scale. Then another discussion, I realized, she's low on this scale. Now the red light is going on, right? I'm saying, wait a minute. This is a low scale person. Yeah, she's beautiful and charming and congenial. But do I really want to get involved with this? This will be a train wreck. So I dismissed her. I said, no thanks, pass. He was shocked.
Yeah.
Because I'm probably the first guy who ever did that. We didn't have a fight or anything like that. I could just see where she was on these scales, and that was not somebody I was going to get involved with.
Yeah, that's smart on you.
No matter how pretty she is. Okay?
Yeah.
So she was probably the first guy who ever did that to her because she's so beautiful and glamorous. Right? So most guys would have jumped right in and had a train wreck. And regretted it later. But that doesn't happen to me because I know this material. Now, look, when I met this lady, I was not saying, I'm going to assess her with Septimics. I wasn't thinking that. No, I was just thinking, here's an attractive lady, you know, and we're talking, you know. But it's so easy to use this. The data just jumps out at you. So you look at it and say, she's at this level. Okay, that tells me she's a control freak. Or she's at this other level. Okay, it tells me that she's not rational. Or whatever. The scales are all very different from one another.
Yeah.
You cannot learn anything about scale A by studying scale B. Nothing.
Okay, gotcha.
And
So
that is why it covers human phenomena, because they're different. See, you're coming at it from a different angle. So if you try to analyze a person on a certain scale and you can't figure it out, go to another scale.
Yeah, okay.
See? Well, where is this person on the scale of control? I see where this person is. But let me tell you the truth. People tell you their levels.
No, yeah, that would make sense.
It comes right out of the person's mouth.
Right before they even know that they're saying it.
That's right. Because they don't know this data. Comes right out of their mouth. Now, when I say tell you means what they do, how they act, body language, eye contact, you know, all this is relevant. So if you get a guy who doesn't make eye contact, speaks very quietly, you know this guy is low on the scale of communication. This guy does not have communication skills, right? As opposed to like Ronald Reagan was known as the great communicator. That was his nickname, okay? He was really good at communicating.
Yeah.
So you could see if you study the scale, he had all of these 7 components of communication were there. And you could go through him and say, yeah, there's where he does this, he does this, he does this, he does this. And it explains why he was so good at it.
Okay.
See? So you could use this on somebody. I've worked with a lot of people to help them learn how to communicate better and use this scale. Because
Okay.
sometimes you have somebody that they have a lot going for them, but they just don't know how to communicate, right?
Yeah.
So you teach them this one scale, and there are exercises in there to tell you how to master these. Now he can communicate. Now he's doing better. It's like he's flowering.
Ah.
You're getting it. So, there's this place where I do business, and they have several different receptionists. So there's one receptionist they have who has awesome communication skills. She has all of these 7 skills that are necessary. So talking to her is a pleasure. Then they have another receptionist there who has no communication skills. None.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to deal with this person. So I'm not going to tell anybody this because people don't like to be evaluated. And I'll tell you what I tell everybody. Never tell anyone the level of a living person on any scale. No, I don't mind telling you what level Abraham Lincoln is because he's dead.
Uh-huh.
But if someone is alive, even if you know, don't tell them. Get them to figure it out themselves.
Gotcha.
Because then they'll have a realization.
And then that's where the magic comes.
Right. So let's say you have a girlfriend, you can see she's low on the scale of attack, right? Then you show her the scale of attack. Say, take a look at this. See? Where are you on this scale? See? And she'll find a bracket in a matter of seconds. And then if she reads it, she'll come back. Oh, I can see I'm at this level. Well, that explains why I can't do this and this and this. And she can move up to the next level, and she's at a higher level, which means her life gets better.
Yeah.
So this is one of these things where you always know that going up to the next level will improve your life.
Yes, sir. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And we are nearing the end of this episode. But with Septimics, it sounds like there's a whole lot to cover. It sounds like there's a whole lot that we could jump into with real life situations and scenarios.
There is.
And so I've got to ask, could we expect to see you on the show sometime in the future
Sure.
to come back on?
Sure.
Sweet.
Many hosts are having me back. So we'll talk about that later.
Alrighty.
I want to say one sentence that will sort of bring this into focus
Okay.
for your viewers. The data in this book are vital for every person and can help you to achieve your goals faster and easier by explaining what might otherwise seem to be inexplicable or random. Right?
Okay.
So if you talk to most guys and they're honest with you, they'll tell you they don't understand women. Right? It's very common.
Yeah.
Most guys don't go around saying, I don't understand women. But if you talk to them because you're a friend, they'll admit to you, yeah, like lots of guys will tell you, I don't understand my wife. I don't know why she did that. Well, if he were to analyze her across these 34 axes, he would understand her better than she understands herself. And then he wouldn't be going around saying, I don't understand women. He certainly would understand his wife. And in doing so, it would sort of be the beginnings of him understanding women in general. Because then he could think about, Betty Lou, who I broke up with. Why did I break? And he could analyze her, see, retrospectively. That explains it. She was at that level and I was at this other level and they conflicted. So this really dispels anxiety and depression because it gets you to a point of clarity in all of your relationships,
Okay.
in all of your activities.
Sweet.
So that's what this is about. So I want to invite your viewers to my website, which is Septemics.com.
Septimics.com.
Temics, where you can see what many readers have said about it, what many journalists have written about it, what the reviews are. There are even sections of the book itself there that you can read. And there is a pre-recorded introduction to Septemics, which you can listen to, which explains it to a new person in 15 minutes.
Oh, wow. Sweet.
So go to Septemics.com and check it out.
Alrighty. Everyone listening out there, go on over to Septimics.com and check out Jim Marshall's book, Septimics. And I forgot the subtitle because it was a little bit longer. Hierarchies of Human...
Septemics, Hierarchies of Human Phenomena.
There we go. But with that being said, Jim, we've got to go for now. And we'll see you sometime in the future. And hopefully we'll go through Septimics on our own free time over here and come back with you with a couple skills that we figured out ourselves.
Okay.
Alrighty.
Thanks, Keegan.
Well, Jim, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for being on the show, and we'll see you in the future, okay?
Okay.
All right.
Now, let me tell you something now that we finished. There is a Septemic slideshow made for the benefit of new people.